Hello and welcome to the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Master Gardener Growing Season webcast series. My name is Susan DeBleek and I am the Assistant Coordinator for the Iowa Master Gardener program, and I just wanted to give you a quick introduction to the Gardening with Youth webcast. This webcast is part of a three-part summer series to help Master Gardener projects go to the next level. Today we're talking about gardening with youth, and next time we're going to be talking about best practices for landscaping for wildlife. Today, Chelsea Krist from FoodCorps is going to be talking about how to engage youth in the garden, giving us some ideas about fun things to do with youth in the garden and best practices for bringing youth into the garden. A couple materials we have for you today. One is a worksheet, so you can follow along with the presentations today and also have a copy of the discussion questions. And on that worksheet, you'll see the link to the online evaluation form, so please go online and give us some feedback as to what you're gaining from these webcasts and how they can be improved. And a quick reminder to log your continuing education hours if you are an Iowa Master Gardener. The requirement is 10 continuing education hours per year, so please log on to the volunteer reporting system and log the 2 hours that you're gaining today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chelsea Krist with FoodCorps. Thank you, Chelsea.
Hello, and welcome to our Master Gardener webinar series recording, all about gardening with youth and FoodCorps Iowa. My name is Chelsea Krist, and I'm the FoodCorps Iowa Fellow for our state. I'm going to give a little bit of overview about the FoodCorps program, why we exist, what our model looks like, and then I'll be moving into some discussion around gardening with youth, best practices for school garden, connections, teaching youth, connecting with family and community, and other ideas for how to partner with schools to create a school-wide culture of health that might happen outside of the garden during the winter months, during off-season times where there are still a lot of opportunities to help connect kids to healthy food, which is what FoodCorps is all about. So, get started a little bit about why FoodCorps exists. Our mission is that together we can build a nation of healthy children. And FoodCorps has been around for over 5 years now, just over 5 years. And we exist because the founders of our organization know that our country is really facing a crisis of child health, and that eating more fruits and vegetables is really critical to improving children's health across Iowa and across the country. Today, 90% of children across the country don't get the recommended amount of vegetables. 60% of children don't eat the recommended amount of fruit every day. On average, children receive just over 3 hours of nutrition education during a school year, and that is based on federal requirements for nutrition education. So out of all of the hours in the day throughout a school year, it doesn't add up to very much education about food on average. Kids are watching up to 10 junk food ads per day on television. We know that there's a really strong marketing force out there that makes junk foods readily available and visible and enticing to kids. 1 in 3 of our nation's children will develop diabetes in their lifetime. And 1 in 2 children of color will develop diabetes in their lifetime. So this is also about, more than just the foods that are out there. It's about other societal forces and factors that make the farm to school work that we do really intersectional and focused on changing these statistics in all of our communities. Children and adults who suffer from diet-related disease miss more days of school, score lower on test scores, advance less in their careers, and are more likely to raise children and repeat the cycle. So a little bit of overview of some of the crises we're seeing in childhood health, but enough of that because What this webinar is about is how we are able to intervene in some of those hard realities and change what our schools look like and the outlook for our kids. So FoodCorps launched in 2011 and has been changing the way children eat by partnering with communities to connect kids to healthy food in schools. So that's sort of our big picture solution. The FoodCorps program is built on the foundational principle that schools are the most effective points of intervention. Schools are where kids spend the majority of their time, and for our most vulnerable students, schools are also where they eat the majority of their calories. So if you look across our public school programs, most districts are operating at least one meal during the day, and that would be lunch, but also breakfast meals, breakfast in the classroom, grab-and-go breakfast programs have been increasing over the past several years, and also lots of our school districts are offering dinner programs as well, knowing that food insecurity when kids go home is a very real thing, and the more that we can offer students at school and through the community of families and administration and staff that a school district can provide can really help increase the nutritional value of foods by creating meal programs through schools. They're also doing lots of snack programs and education, like the Pick a Better Snack program in Iowa, which is a federally funded SNAP Ed nutrition program, and then also the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable program and other smart snack programs that districts operate themselves. So the way that we break down what service looks like for our service members in their community partnerships is in 3 ways: hands-on lessons, healthy school meals, and a school-wide culture of health. So I'll go through a little bit about what each of these look like, and the one that we're going to be focusing on most during this webinar is hands-on lessons. So our AmeriCorps FoodCorps service members work with students to grow and cook and taste new foods, which we have evidence-backed research that says, this kind of intervention and support for students builds their skills and changes their food preferences, giving them the opportunity to try new things, to see the full process of how their food grows, to know how to cook it, to practice recipes that they use at home, at school, or learn new recipes. It's a really great way to build in some behavior change and preference change throughout the school year. So we have service members partnering with our public school communities across the country and tending, building, maintaining, harvesting from school gardens, and lots of the times helping to facilitate all of the community support that goes into a garden program. So getting buy-in from staff and teachers and administration, but also organizing with other community partners for fundraising opportunities, organizing with families to help maintain school gardens over the summer, partnering with after-school programs and summer school programs to get as many people out into those gardens as possible to really create the community around all of the food that we're able to grow at schools. Other parts of hands-on learning are, like I said, cooking, either outdoors or in the classroom. Our service members collaborate with teachers to develop some lessons or curriculum that ties in really well with core curriculum and meets the standards that they already need to be teaching. And so we know that lots of the education that we can do in the garden or with food in the classroom is related to math, is related to science and social studies and culture, can be very artistic, and can create a lot of new learning opportunities, maybe less traditional learning opportunities, especially when kids get the opportunity to go outside and do all of this stuff. Another one of our focus areas is healthy school meals. And this is creating cafeteria experiences that help students make the healthiest choice, and it's the easiest option for them. So getting them really excited in the classroom or in the garden through that sort of education, and then helping them to make the healthy choices in the cafeteria and eat the vegetables that they're required to take, and tell their friends that it's cool to eat vegetables. And a lot of this work is done through partnerships with local producers. So Our FoodCorps service members help build bridges between food service directors and staff that operates, in our school districts really at capacity, on really low budgets, with local farmers who are doing the same thing, working really hard, not making that much money, and trying to create a new market out of all of it that supports students, and the local economy and local farmers and food service. So really exciting partnerships happening there, where we're seeing more and more local food be sourced into school meals and consistently be sourced as regular menu items. So here are just some examples of really amazing lunch trays that are popping up across the country. Local vegetables and fruits, milk, protein sources, and another thing that our service members do to help support these sort of programs is facilitate taste tests in the cafeteria. So once you've sourced that local produce, say it's this kale salad, for example, our service members will sometimes help the food service staff prep the fresh vegetable and fruit and get it ready for the taste test, but really just kind of be the hype people in the cafeteria and offer samples to kids, have them vote, and that's something I'll touch on a little bit later. But there's a new way to build energy and enthusiasm for the food that's being served in a cafeteria. And the last focus area that our service members work on is creating a school-wide culture of health. So as a whole, the school community and environment, from hallways to classrooms to cafeteria to grounds, celebrates healthy food. So the most important piece, I think, of this area of focus is the culture piece. So we know that every school has different culture. Every child in every school, has different home culture. So how can we really affirm and recognize all of those cultures and identities and food preferences and stories that kids have in their homes, that teachers have outside of school, and bring all of these people and all of these amazing ideas together to create a culture that celebrates food, and tells stories. So we do this, it's a great opportunity for visual promotions and creative works of art around a school or a cafeteria. Our FoodCorps service members help build a team of healthy school supporters in each of the schools that they work at. So this might be a wellness committee, a group of parents in the PTO, a food champion team, and this group of supporters meets regularly throughout the year to sort of strategize and come up with projects for a FoodCorps service member and other members of the staff and students to lead throughout the year. So promotions around drinking more water during the day, or goals related to getting every classroom outside in the garden to plant something in the springtime, or ideas for, grade teams like third grade or second grade partnering with a FoodCorps service member to cook something for their math class, a spring semester of math, things like that really bring the school together and help everybody learn and appreciate and get excited about healthy food in the school. So a little bit more about FoodCorps. This year we have 215 FoodCorps members serving all across the country. We are in 17 states and Washington, D.C., so you can see Iowa is really the only Midwestern state that is a part of FoodCorps at this time, and we have been since the beginning of the program in 2011. Our service members work with 170 school and community partners, so they're based with either school districts or with extension offices, nonprofits, other community partners like that. And they're serving just over 350 schools at depth, so meaning that our service members are spending many hours there a week working with kids for at least 10 hours throughout the year, consistently having class time, coming into classrooms, bringing kids outside to the garden, partnering in the cafeteria, all of the things that I kind of touched on before. So in Iowa, Our state partner is the Iowa State Extension Local Foods Program team. We have 12 service members across the state, mostly in central and eastern Iowa at this point, but we are always looking to build new relationships with folks in places that are not technically FoodCorps sites yet, and see what our strategy for that looks like over the next couple of years. We have 6 service sites right now that are, like I said, both public school districts and county extension offices. So we have 3 service members with Des Moines Public Schools, 1 service member in Davenport Public Schools, 1 service member in Wapello County Extension down in Ottumwa, 2 service members in Lynn County Extension serving Cedar Rapids, 2 service members in Blackhawk County Extension serving the Waterloo area, and 3 service members up in Northeast Iowa that partner with Luther College and the Northeast Iowa Food and Fitness Initiative. Those service members live and serve the communities of Olwine and Postville. And next year we will have, for the second year, one of our service members leading an early childhood pilot in Northeast Iowa. So traveling around to many communities up there and working with Head Start programs, preschools, connecting with kids before they enter kindergarten. And here's a picture of our lovely FoodCorps Iowa team at our state orientation this year. We had our training in Davenport, and those 2 little girls in front are presidents of the Green Thumb Club at one of the schools there in Davenport, and they gave us a really amazing tour of all the projects that they were working on. They fundraised themselves this year to get a outdoor learning space, to get a greenhouse built. They literally made phone calls to community partners and stores and other potential funders around town to get the donations and money required for that. So you can tell all of those big smiles are because we're having a really great time and an inspiring moment learning from these 2 great little girls. So last year, our service members across the country reached over 100,000 kids in their school programming and after-school programming, built or revitalized 452 gardens. So those are school and community gardens, but the majority are school gardens. And introduced 664 new healthy foods onto lunch trays. So this is really exciting to see. These are things that were taste tested in cafeterias that were menued by the food service staff. So once they have a successful taste test, get feedbacks that students really do enjoy the food, which I said before is often locally sourced. School districts, seeing them commit to continuing to serve that on a cycle menu is really exciting, and that happened a lot last year. And we recruited over 8,000 volunteers for local projects. So again, that community connection being a really key piece to our program, and the sustainability of the programs, all really supported by local volunteers, lots of those being master gardeners. So we have some ways of measuring our impact in schools. While a lot of the data and a lot of the things that we learn throughout the year are anecdotal, we do have some opportunities for gathering more quantitative information. So the way that we do that is our service members use a tool called the Healthy School Toolkit, and they track sort of the beginning landscape of what a school district or school looks like in August. And then after working with the school district for the entire school year, they will do a follow-up progress report in May to see what changes happened throughout the year. Did we increase nutrition education? Did more kids come out to the garden than ever before? What local foods did we introduce to the cafeteria? Did we have any wins around changing wellness policy or getting support from higher administration on these things? Did we make breakfast in the classroom increase participation in that program? So what we have after last year of doing this first year of tracking data is that 7 in 10 students improved their attitudes toward vegetables, tried new ones, or maintained their high regard for vegetables if they had already liked them. So really exciting to see that with more food education and opportunities to try new foods or even not new foods to some kids. 7 in 10 kids improve their attitudes. And when we track the transformation of the whole school environment using the scorecard to set goals and achieve lasting improvements, we see that 70% of schools with FoodCorps were measurably healthier by the end of the year. So again, that's using the Healthy School Progress Report, where we're tracking factors related to the entire school wellness and school-wide culture of health to see what changes were made. So 70% of schools partnering with FoodCorps did make measurably healthier changes by the end of the year. So really exciting number to see that. And our alumni, we have a really amazing, robust cohort of FoodCorps alumni. Our AmeriCorps members are a pipeline of diverse and talented leaders committed to lifelong careers in school food, public health, and education. So some stats that we have about our alumni network is that 70% of FoodCorps alumni continue into jobs in the public or nonprofit sector. 20% of them are hired by one of our school or community partners. And 46 new jobs, roles like healthy food educators and school wellness champions, have been inspired by FoodCorps service. So the opportunity for job creation is the thing on this slide that really sticks out to me. That's an exciting thing to see, because when we create these positions through service organizations, we know that that's not a truly sustainable long-term solution to building this sort of healthy food education into our school system. And so when we see that new jobs are created, a lot of those are in the form of basically hiring a service member on to do full-time work past their service term. So a school like that would graduate from FoodCorps technically and hire their own long-term food educator. So really cool to see positions like that created across the country. And I know that there are several of those that are new to Iowa, and lots of great people to connect through that experience. One of our FoodCorps alumni service members is Molly Schindler. She served in Olwine from 2014 to 2016, and she's now a farmer at Ecollective Farms in Mechanicsville, Iowa, and also an intern with the National Farm to School Network. So an example of one of our alumni who really stay connected to farm to school work, food justice work, even farming, and really remains committed to the FoodCorps Iowa program. So we have folks like this, folks like Molly all across Iowa who really bring so much to our FoodCorps term every year. So getting into more of the nuts and bolts of our school garden work and gardening with youth. Whenever I think about our FoodCorps mission and all of the energy and momentum around school garden programs in the last several years, I think about this question, why school gardens? Because I get it a lot from educators, from administration. Why, with all of the other programs that we have that we could bring into our school or things that we could do with kids or parents, why do school gardens, why are they so attractive, and why do they really matter? So I think it's really important that we, as people who know the inherent benefits of gardening, we know it's valuable to get kids gardening and growing and cooking fresh food, to have them engaging in nature and in the growing process, exercising their bodies and stimulating their senses. That sounds really good. It all sounds good, but it's important to have some hard data to back all of that up, because as we know, teachers in schools are very busy and have a lot of demands on them. So it's helpful for all of us to know that there is a growing body of research showing that school gardens and related nutrition and culinary education can bring a variety of positive impacts to students, including improved academic performance, increased consumption of fruit and veggies by students and their parents, which is very exciting, and improved student behavior. So we might not talk about the evidence behind all of this stuff and all of the research that exists, but it's been around for over a decade, and there are really great networks putting out more and more data behind school gardens that we can all use as stakeholders in kids' health to get more schools to support programs like school gardens, nutrition education, cooking classes. So if anyone is ever interested in looking at the research and using reports or data to help make a case to a school or to a family or to a PTO or whatever about a school garden program, I am more than happy to share that. But these are sort of the three main findings that the research shows up to this point. So the garden is a fantastic place for students to learn about core subjects, whether that's measuring the growth of plants, learning about insects, or writing down observations of their environment. Sometimes behavior in an outdoor classroom differs from behavior inside, and often kids think recess and play when they get outside. So it definitely requires employing some unique management techniques when you bring some kids outside into the garden. So thinking about classroom management strategies, for anyone who's going to be working with a group of kids in the garden, that's what we're going to get into a little bit right now. So the pictures on this, I think are great to just show that gardens can look like a lot of different things. You can do a garden-based activity with just a box of dirt and some worms and magnifying glasses and create a scavenger hunt in that way, or teach about the life cycle of a worm and soil. And the picture in the bottom left corner is square foot gardening, which is a really great way to set kids up to plant things in a way that they will grow. Letting them know how many seeds they can put inside a square foot. You can grow a really diversified raised bed with this model. So a big piece of classroom management or working with kids is facilitating their learning in the way that works best for them. So setting them up for success through building environments that really support their ability to learn. So well before kids get outside, it's important to set up the space. So for anyone in the process of building a garden or collaborating with a school to get a garden built, it's great to keep this in mind. An outdoor classroom garden doesn't necessarily look like your typical home garden or even a community garden plot. You want to make sure you've got space designated for students to sit as a group, whether that's a round of tree stumps or benches or even rug squares that you can bring out with you. Tables are great to have. You want to think about the distractions that students might have outside and try to prevent them from getting carried away as much as possible. So sun can be an issue. I'd recommend having canopy or shade available to meet with students, like a pop-up tent, or even knowing which side of the school building will provide shade during class time or garden time. That can be a great way to get some natural shade on those hot summer days. It's always smart to have clear boundaries between growing spaces and walkways, whether that's raised beds or well-mulched paths. This will help students walk where they're supposed to and not feel bad when they trample some plants. Signage is really important as well, like having placards with the plant's name or a sign that keeps people aware that seeds are planted in a bed. Those can be really helpful too. We have some great signage from the Pick a Better Snack program that we put into gardens as soon as we plant that say, not ready to pick, don't pick yet. And then green ones that say, go ahead and pick this plant. The colors can also help kids figure out what's good to eat and what's not good to eat at the right time. And I love to say and see gardens that you can tell where the designers of them have, thought like a kid in developing them and made it a really fun space. So this trellis that is turned over on its side so that kids can crawl through a tomato tunnel. Those are really amazing. And when you think like a kid, you quickly realize that that's a cool thing to do, to crawl through that, to lay under there and read a book, to grow colorful things, not just the vegetables that you want to teach kids about, but also edible flowers, pollinator space, things like that maybe are more whimsical, but are really, really fun and cool for kids to get to check out. So this picture in the bottom left is of Matthew 25's garden in Cedar Rapids, and you can see that they have several benches, a upcycled, I don't even know what that thing is, a big wooden object that they use as a table, and they have a more industrial-looking garden plot there with longer rows. Most of our smaller school gardens won't have that kind of setup. And the picture of the raised bed with the kids cultivating that area, just to show that you want to make sure that the raised beds are narrow enough so that kids can reach across them with a tool or with their arms and not need to step in the beds or potentially fall into the beds. So here's a picture of one of our FoodCorps gardens in Elkader. This is at Central Elementary School. Really beautiful design. You can see that they have bright flowers growing, really well mulched paths. They have a good fence structure, some signage to the left there, and signs on their plants. And I showed this picture before. This is Hillis Elementary in Des Moines, a picture of the school garden there. So I would just like to pause here and, as a group, discuss what do you think makes this garden space work for kids there. Great. So I hope you had a great discussion about this garden plot. Some things that I think work really well about this space for kids is that the paths are very wide. Sometimes when we're working out here, we'll have up to 2 classes of students at a time, so that can be 60 kids. So you want to make sure they have plenty of space to stand in between beds, but also so that everyone can see or gather around an entire bed. Some other great things about this space are, again, the narrowness of the beds. I would never go 4 feet, more than 4 feet wide when building a raised bed, because kids can reach from both sides with that area just enough to get to the middle. There are clear boundaries between where kids can walk and where they shouldn't walk. So the wooden raised bed structures are a really good way to define that. But then you'll also see in the back of the picture, we built some raised beds out of cinder blocks there that are dug into the ground a little bit. Cheap way to build raised beds. Pretty heavy to haul all of that material, but it's kind of fun to have the kids paint those cinder blocks, or they can plant flowers in the individual holes around the cinder blocks, and they're pretty cheap to get. Another thing about this garden that's great is there's consistent plant markers in every bed, so all of the plants are labeled. There's a rain gauge, so that some sort of weather element is a great thing to build in, to have kids come out and check how much did it rain last night, what's the temperature outside. These can get as high tech as you want, but this is a very basic example of just a little rain gauge. You'll also notice that there's no tools lying around. Sometimes in our adult gardens or in our spaces in our backyards or our community garden, you might see shovels laying out or pitchforks laying out, and it's really important to have some sort of shed structure to keep all of those things locked up and make sure kids are only using them as tools during garden time. If you look in the back left corner of the picture where that tree is, you'll see that there's a really nice gathering area over there with some wooden stumps that kids can sit in a circle around. There's a little podium there too for a teacher or a presenter to talk about a lesson before going into the garden. So that's really great. And the last thing about this garden that I think works really well for kids is just the variety of structures and some of the fun elements that you can build in. So the thing that they're walking on there is just a pile of dirt that was dropped in the wrong spot by the district. And so we decided to plant a bunch of tomatoes on it and made this little tomato mountain. And these kids loved it. They would walk. There was one path across that pile of topsoil and kind of built up the tomatoes to a new level, which looked really cool when they got a lot bigger over the summer. And right behind them, you can see that there's a wheelchair accessible raised bed there. We have 2 of those in that garden so that anyone who's not able to reach down to the ground and for a traditional raised bed that's built up at least 3 feet high, so that folks who might be in a wheelchair or would prefer to sit while gardening have that ability to do so. So a really important thing about working with kids in gardens is setting clear expectations with them. This is another picture from Hillis School Garden and an example of cross-age teaching lessons that we did there, where we had 5th graders working with 2nd graders and setting the 5th graders up, as garden leaders, really creates a cool bond between those grades. 2nd graders really look up to the 5th grade even more than a garden teacher most of the time. They're pretty cool to be able to go on a scavenger hunt with or plant things with. So these are some of our students checking out a strawberry plant and looking at the life cycle of fruit in a garden. So for them to be working, in partnership, to be staying on task and to be learning about the things that we want them to be learning about, with always a dash of chaos or distraction for sure. We want to make sure that we're letting them know what we expect of them in the space and of each other. So when students come out to the garden, I recommend having clear garden rules or expectations written out for them to follow. And having students review these rules on a regular basis to help them sort of get in the habit of following them, remembering them, and holding each other accountable to them. So always make sure that you demonstrate the do's before giving students tools, and always be sure to give them only enough of what they need. So not the whole seed packet of carrots, for example, when you might only need a sprinkle, and otherwise you'll have carrots growing in every part of your garden. Here are some examples of garden signage that lists some expectations that we've seen used across our schools. Walking instead of running, listening for directions, treating all living things with respect. That includes plants, bugs, and people. Sharing with others and working together. And that it's okay to get dirty, because lots of kids are, sometimes believe that if they're getting dirty, if they're getting their clothes a little bit messy, that they're going to be in trouble, and they're not so used to it. So messy hands are a good thing. As always, having this as a visual aid that's out there at all times is really important. And just so we never forget that a little chaos is okay. Gardens are a place for students to explore, and some will thrive with less structure that the garden classroom affords. So don't be afraid to let go of a little control out there. As long as you are able to provide a safe place for the students and give them the freedom to be curious and self-discover, everyone's going to have a good time and learn something. So sometimes this means you don't get the 100 carrot seeds that you planted in a square foot, or a child might drown a plant out there once in a while, but it's worth it. And this picture is from a garden cleanup day at one of the schools where I served with FoodCorps in Des Moines. And we just had kids going around and pulling out the old stalks of the plants after they had died over the winter, and we were cleaning things up for spring. So really exciting faces there. You can tell that maybe this was a little more chaotic than our more traditional or regular school garden lessons, but they had a great time, and they will no matter what you're doing out there. So these are some documents from Des Moines Public Schools. I think having resources like this are really great for people who support school gardens, maybe more of the planning side and the strategy side from a district perspective or a community partner perspective, more than the kids for sure. So one is the school garden checklist, and this checklist outlines all of the required and recommended steps for creating a school garden within Des Moines Public School District. So every school district will be different, but this is a great example of setting, for adults too, clear expectations for what a garden program looks like. So things that you need from a committee at a school: it's required to have principal support, establish a vision for the garden, speak with the custodian, food service, and other stakeholders. And then there are some recommended steps. So forming a garden committee with staff, parents, and other community members, taking a tour or visiting other school gardens around the area, joining the Des Moines School Garden Network Google group for updates and resources. So things like that help a school, the folks on the ground who are in the space most often really set themselves up for success. And the other document, What to Plant in Your School Garden, is also from Des Moines Public Schools and helps answer that really common question of what do you do with the school garden over the summer? And we get that a lot. And so it really depends, I think, on what summer programming looks like, what involvement from parents or community partners looks like, how engaged folks want to be over the summer. That determines what you should plant in your school garden over the summer. So instead of the, traditional image of a really full and diverse school garden that in peak production of tomatoes and peppers and watermelons and everything over the summer and early fall, you can just sometimes, if you don't have a summer program, maybe you're just doing a pollinator garden and planting greens in the early spring to eat before school gets out, and planting something midsummer that you can harvest when all the kids come back, like potatoes or garlic or things like that. So the needs of the garden should definitely match what the community is able to support and want from a school garden. So we have lots of resources like this, specific to different school districts, but also more generally, if you're ever interested in adapting them to your own area, we'd be happy to share info and some consultation on that. So now that we've talked about engaging students in the garden, I think it's really important to talk about engaging parents and community members as well. These folks are key allies in making your garden sustainable and productive. This picture is a before picture from Hillis Elementary, where we really relied on this amazing community partner named Ray Mailer, who owns Cherry Glen Learning Farm in Polk City. He has a tiller, and he came out and helped with the garden expansion and committed a lot of volunteer time several years ago to helping get the first school gardens really up and running in Des Moines. So a good example of a community partner that helps lay the foundation for the garden program. Even though you might not show up every Thursday for garden club, that's okay. But relying on some of the tools and resources that other folks have can be a huge asset. So from the outset, be sure to try and involve families in the ownership of the garden project. You can invite them to join the garden committee. You can have them give input in how the garden produce should be used. Just find your experts through families, because lots of folks have tons of experience, maybe home gardens, maybe they've gardened before, and the purpose of the garden, again, should fit the needs of those folks who want to be involved. You can invite representatives to serve on school garden committees from families, from the schools, from food service staff, custodians, anyone should really be welcome at that table. And ensure that parents are involved in the decisions of how the school garden produce is used, like I said. Something that we did at Hillis Elementary was identify and work with families who really had an interest and had experience in cooking and gardening, and highlighted them at our different family work nights to bring a recipe. We would harvest the produce needed for that from the garden, and I would bring the supplies for cooking so that we could add a little bit of excitement and change every week to our garden club. So it wasn't just the same old come out, weed and water every Thursday over the summer and take home produce, which is great in itself, but we were able to offer a little bit more engagement from parents and eat something together in the garden, which is a really special piece of what that space can provide. It's really important to promote the school garden and use very clear signage that helps folks walking by the garden learn more about the project and be able to contact somebody or see exactly when Garden Club meets so that they could come and check it out next week if it happens on a regular basis like that. So publicizing the garden to the PTA and the PTO, community organizations and businesses, and connecting with other school and community gardeners around the city. So I think across Des Moines Public Schools, at least, we have 28 school gardens operating around the city, and there are so many important players that on a school-by-school level make those happen. So it's really great to find community in that network of people and share ideas and resources with each other throughout the school year. A couple of ideas or recipe for success here in partnership with families and other garden stakeholders. Hosting consistent events to engage more parents and volunteers even in the off season. That consistency piece is really what makes folks able to keep coming back. Having a garden club happen on the same night or a family cooking night happen on the same night of every week or every month helps folks just be able to rely that it's going to happen. Even if they can't come one week, they could come at the same time the next week and everyone would still be there. Incorporating the garden and healthy taste tests into family nights at schools. There's lots of opportunity for that. Providing info at parent-teacher conferences or open houses. All of those other opportunities for parents to come into a school. Hosting a mock farmers market with students is a really fun way to get their parents involved, to get potentially other vendors involved. We've had lots of our FoodCorps folks do this at their schools. And it's cool, especially when, there might not be a market in the neighborhood or nearby. You can have the kids be the vendors and for donation, share all of the produce that they've been growing throughout the summer in their summer school program or through their family clubs. And share produce with volunteers. Always, always, always. A lot of folks will get really excited to come into the garden and we'll be looking for opportunities to taste the foods, to take some stuff home. So there's great ways to do that. We always had our families be able to take home these little very cheap and affordable baskets full of produce during the summer, and then they could bring them back the next week to get them refilled. So stepping inside for a second and a little bit away from the garden space, because it's in most areas, growing from April through the beginning of school year in up till October in some cases, depending on what you're growing. But there's a lot of the school year that happens when the garden is not growing. And there are lots of opportunities to continue to do education in terms of healthy food outside of that garden space. So I just want to pause for a second here and just have folks quickly brainstorm some ways to teach gardening or healthy food lessons indoors. Okay, these pictures might have given you some ideas, but we're going to just talk about a few more ways to bring the garden indoors to the classroom. And the first obvious great idea is to cook with kids. That's something that I touched on earlier that is a big piece of our FoodCorps service. But cooking with kids is a great way to incorporate your garden into the classroom. So just 3 ideas, very simple ideas for having kids cook in the classroom with you. First idea is saving some popcorn kernels, and you can pop the popcorn at any time of the year in a skillet with a glass top. Kids really love this. It's a great lesson on water expanding as it heats up and turns into steam, and how when it explodes the kernel and the seed turns inside out and the starch in it explodes, and they can watch the heat release through the steam. So teaching about, states of matter or, some of those science components that you can build into this, and you can grow the popcorn in your school garden. And like I said, save the seeds and do this any time of the year. Another idea is just when the garden is growing and in production, making a simple salad by having students wash and spin the greens. They can chop up some other veggies to put in it, make a really simple dressing, or even eat a finger salad, which is just when you want to keep it extra simple and eat some greens right out of the garden. And the last idea is veggie quesadillas. These are a really fun way to cook inside with garden fresh ingredients. And again, all you need is a skillet and maybe some tortillas. We've made a lot of plant part quesadillas in our cooking clubs, and those are always a hit, seeing which students can put the most plant parts into their quesadillas. So the roots and the stems and the flowers and seeds, etc. So a little bit more about cooking with kids is this as another hands-on way to teach students about healthy eating and nutrition. And with the cooking extension, we're really looking at the full process of where food comes from and what to do with it once you've harvested it. And like I said before, it's a great opportunity to teach core curriculum like fractions and states of matter and estimation, and really allows for an opportunity to build some teamwork and collaboration into classroom time during the day. So there are lots of other indoor garden and food activities that volunteers can partner with teachers to help lead during the school day. Some ideas on here are dissecting seeds, building worm bins, starting transplants, and sprout potatoes indoors. Teach about how a stem transfers water and nutrients to the rest of the plant by having students place celery or carnations in dyed water. Plan a spring garden with students. There's lots of opportunities for math, research, collaboration with other classrooms in the process that goes into planning a spring garden. And a really fun thing is to bring a farmer to come to speak to the class, whether that's in person or through video chat like Skype. This picture up here in the left-hand corner is a classroom that I worked with really often when I was in FoodCorps. And some of my friends operate a farm in Johnston called Grade A Gardens. And these farmers had time to come in to the classroom during the winter. So there was, I think, probably snow outside. And all they did was bring in pictures of their farm that we put on the smart board in the front of the room. And most of these kids had never met a farmer before, anyone who identified as a farmer. And they just kept saying things like, I didn't know farmers wear glasses, and I didn't know farmers had dogs, and I didn't know farmers drank coffee, and all of these really fun things that the kids picked up on just, from meeting, kind of silly things that they picked up on from meeting with some of these farmers and just looked at pictures of their farm. We later in the year had the opportunity to go out and visit their farm in person, so that was a great full circle moment. But most of these kids at the end of this lesson were talking about how they wanted to be farmers when they grew up. And I thought that was really cool, and so did our farmer friends who came in. Besides the classroom, there are also tons of opportunities for bringing the garden to the cafeteria. So lots of our service members spend time with cafeteria staff, and in that space, planning taste tests that I touched on a little bit before. So this is another exciting way to encourage healthy eating and get kids sharing their input on food or taste tests that the food service staff prepares, share that directly back with the chefs and all the folks who prep the food. So here's a picture of a service member named Amy from a couple of years ago that they dug up the potatoes from the school garden, processed them, prepared them with students in the school, baked them in the oven in the school kitchen, and served them as a taste test during lunch. And it says, "Thanks, School Garden, for the potatoes." And the other picture is our service members in Cedar Rapids, Nathan and Taylor, who are doing some taste tests of fresh pumpkin and carrot in the cafeteria. And they show an example of how you can collect feedback from kids and share it with the food service staff or food service directors, using voting jars or this sticker or writing method that they've used. And we always say it's a spectrum of loved it, liked it, tried it, not my favorite. So just encouraging kids to give everything a try, even if it's not their favorite yet. That first brave bite is the most important piece. So a couple of other notes on working with the cafeteria staff and in the kitchen is that it's really important to follow safety protocols, know that you're going into their space and they're cooking for hundreds of kids in a really limited amount of time. So communicating before a taste test event or before you want to come in and, serve something that's from the school garden, you really need to make sure you give them a heads up and get invited into that room with them. They can definitely help you learn where to find the supplies in the kitchen space that you'll need to run a taste test, or sample produce, and always clean up when finished. There's a really fast pace happening in most school cafeterias as they're shuffling kids through the lunchtime and out to recess. So making sure that you're there supporting the food service staff and not getting in the way of their work is really important. And we have great relationships with the kitchens and the staff that we partner with, and they are really key to changing, culture and systems in a school, is to having the support through, relationships and trust with the people who make it happen every day. Just one more note about taste tests and serving garden produce or other local produce in the cafeteria is that it's really important to do promotion around this. Loudspeaker announcements in the morning are a thing that can happen. Writing something about the special event in the PTA newsletter, making signs or have students make signs and put those up around the school. Just don't want these things to happen without the proper promotion in place, so that everyone can celebrate and be a part of it. So getting the kids and the teachers and the parents all really jazzed about fun opportunities like this that happen in the cafeteria are really important to this. And this is another document from Des Moines Public Schools, just to touch on really quickly a little bit about garden produce safety guidelines and what food safety looks like in the garden and in the cafeteria for those opportunities where you bring food in from the garden and serve it inside. So just some general notes is keeping the process simple and able to be picked up by anyone who's volunteering or helping out in the school garden, or a taste test is really important. This document is a very simple version of safety guidelines that people need to follow, that the Des Moines Public School District has approved, so that when schools say, I don't know if I can bring in the cherry tomatoes from the garden and put them on the salad bar, or I don't know if we can have a kale salad because it doesn't fall into our guidelines or our, approval from the food service director. We have this document and we can say, well, it does. There's no, as long as we're following these really simple rules here, nobody will get in trouble and everything should go smoothly, because it's actually something the district, supports. And maybe they're not able to facilitate the process from a district level at this point, but when you have point people and human resources and individual schools having something like this where everyone can follow the rules and feel confident in the process is really important. Again, working with cafeteria staff, always washing your hands, produce, always making sure kids are washing their hands, sanitizing containers and surfaces. Schools will typically have their own supplies for that, and storing unused produce safely. So making sure that if things need to be refrigerated or kept in a cool space, that you have areas for that, and giving instructions for students and families who take produce home from the garden to make sure that they're washing it, and even once it gets home, making sure that they're storing it, able to store it in a place where it won't go bad or make anyone not feel good. So, again, we can share resources like this for any other specific districts that are interested in making their own. There are tons of other really great food safety, garden produce safety documents from districts all across the country. So at the end, wrapping up here, just put together a list of some discussion questions for y'all to work through as a group of folks watching this webinar. So in any order or time amount that feels right for your group. The first question is, which schools host garden programs in your community? So are you able to find out which schools in your districts have school gardens? Is there a website devoted to this? Who are the point people for these gardens, if they do exist at the school or at a district level? It might not all be really easy to find online, but people in schools know who's typically the lead person for the garden program. So connecting with them and finding out if they meet regularly. Like I said earlier, the consistency of meetings is a really great thing for a school garden program to offer. Those open invites to community members, say every Wednesday night or Thursday night throughout a growing season, helps bring in new folks. So finding that out right off the bat is a great way to get connected. Another question you might consider or discuss is, what skills or resources can you share with a local school or garden club? So what sort of expertise, experiences, tools, supplies, everything that can go into a school garden program? What do you have as a Master Gardener individual or as a Master Gardener group that could support a school that already has a garden, or support a school that is looking to create a garden program? You might also offer some ideas for community partnerships and fundraising. There are lots through Extension that school districts sometimes have not tapped into, but even more broadly, funding partnerships from community banks or supplies from local grocery stores or hardware stores, things that a lot of entities in a community can provide to a school or district to help build up their garden program. Another discussion piece, maybe with an existing school or garden club or amongst yourselves, is gardening in the summer or when school is out. What does that look like? What kind of supports are there? Is there a summer school program? Are there a group of families that's interested in being involved to help run the garden? All of those things that are important to figure out before you jump into a garden season. And then the last piece for discussion amongst yourselves, or especially with staff, teachers, principals, folks in schools, is what are the curriculum connections that you can offer to help bridge the gap between the school day and everything that happens indoors and the garden outside and all of the opportunities for learning that exist out there. So can you offer some ideas for curriculum connection? We have lots of that work already pre-done from our FoodCorps side that we'd be happy to share, examples of lessons that tie directly into core curriculum that teachers use. But it's a great way to not only engage the kids in a different way of learning, but also get that buy-in from the teacher that going outside during the school day and having kids be in the garden and setting them up for success is a real way to meet some of those requirements that they have to, and to do it in a really fun and way that appeals to students with all kinds of learning styles. Thank you so much for listening to this webinar about gardening with youth and FoodCorps Iowa. Again, my name is Chelsea Krist, and I'm the fellow for the program. I live and work remotely from Des Moines, and also serve on the Iowa State Extension Local Foods Program team. So please reach out to me with any questions about our FoodCorps program. I'm happy to share any resources that were mentioned on this webinar or answer any questions that were not answered on this webinar. So please feel free to reach out to me. There's my email address. And follow FoodCorps Iowa on Facebook. We have lots of updates about the school gardens and other programs that we're involved with across the state of Iowa, and would love to connect more with Master Gardeners. Thanks so much.